Citadel, the world's most beloved liquidity firm, sued the SEC back in 2020. Why? What was so threatening that they had to sue over? Stick around a little and I'll explain what goes bump in the night for these guys. In this particular scenario, it was people who subscribed, liked, and shared this video. But what also goes bump in the night for Citadel is Brad Katsuyama of IEX Group. Now, what did this man do that pissed and scared Citadel at the same time? Well, other than creating an exchange, he had a new order type called D-limit, otherwise known as discretionary limit. If you look at the structure really quickly, it's nothing special. It looks almost exactly like every single other way for other exchanges to kind of handle their orders, except that this order type delayed high-frequency traders by 350 microseconds. To give you a visual representation, this is how slow, from the nanosecond perspective, everybody else is. Now, if you're a network engineer, comment down below, but for the most part, none of this really matters because everything's measured in milliseconds, and on top of all that, I don't know any human that could actually react in a nanosecond type of reactionary environment, but Citadel wants to argue that this interferes with the natural course of the market. Despite IEX only being a singular exchange, there being other exchanges out there as well as other order types. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, Citadel was essentially arguing that the way IEX was doing this, they can essentially give you a misquote, which can lead to mispricing or maybe even manipulation, and that this should have never been approved in the first place because it essentially violates the law. Citadel's lawyer brought this to a DC court in 2020 in front of 3 judges, and those 3 judges basically said, you're literally crying about 350 microseconds. They dragged this out for about 3 months in that span, only to get denied, and that's where the story would end had Citadel not have deep pockets, and they tried to appeal it again in October of 2021. This lawyer spent almost an entire year arguing for Citadel to overturn the previous ruling, and we finally got a decision on July 29th, 2022. And the dramatic conclusion to this battle is they rejected it again, citing that you're literally squabbling over 350 microseconds. Some thoughts that come to mind is that it's kind of ironic that a private company, Citadel, is complaining to a regulator, the SEC, about another private company's practices, IEX. The reason why it's a little ironic and actually kind of comical too is that if you remember a little bit about Wall Street's history and what the legacy wanted, the legacy Wall Streeters wanted them to be private businesses because they felt that essentially if they were government institutions, they'd be too slow. NYSE, NASDAQ, all these institutions are essentially private companies and get the right to move and do practice the way they want to under regulatory scrutiny. It's a separation of, corporations in the state. Second, if you don't know how essentially this affects you and sticks it to them as well, let me paint you a picture. Say this is you for a moment. You have 100 shares at $1. Say that now you want to get out of your position. So you go look at the book and you see that the bid ask is between $1 and $1.05. Now, for basic mechanics, because this person is here first, they will get their 100 shares filled before you. So now what you say is, I have 100 shares at $1. Now I want to sell it at $1.04. So then you go and fire out your order, and then suddenly the book becomes you right here at $1.04 with 100 shares to sell. And then there's someone that just suddenly jumps out of nowhere almost immediately at $1.03 ahead of you. Now, what typically happens and can happen is that you'll say, okay, well, to get ahead of that guy, I will now go at $1.02. And when you post the order at $1.02, suddenly someone pops in at $1.01 just ahead of you. This is by design to frustrate the hell out of you. This is only one component of it, but what happens when you pull your entire order, you revert back to this. This thing even has a name for itself. It's called latency arbitrage. They can essentially see your order come in so quickly that they can instantaneously get ahead of you or front run you to get a fill before you do. And you essentially get hurt out of this because you don't get the best prices for your fills. And don't think you're safe just because there's a 1 cent spread because midpoints exist. Essentially, this is one of many things that can be argued where these institutions have that type of advantage over you because they're going to be the first in and the first out because they're going to get the best prices, and by the time you step in, you're basically going to be paying a large premium for something that you shouldn't have. Now, to wrap up, I personally enjoyed this topic because it covers parts of liquidity, something, as you guys know, I used to kind of handle with, and I kind of regret taking that job for granted because unfortunately I was too busy being distracted by chasing the big runners. From my personal perspective, I will concede that retail does need some advantages, and the 350 microseconds, in my opinion, isn't that much at all. If it's still nothing, because if you guys look at internet speeds, it's still measured in milliseconds. Maybe Citadel thought that this could be used as, kind of leeway to open up that discussion, and this might actually hurt their business because if their goal is to make as many transactions as fast as possible, by them slowing down their connection speed, they can't throw through as many transactions as fast as possible, therefore hurting their own bottom line. But at the same time, I'm also kind of glad that there are people out there like Brad Katsuyama who are laying the groundwork to help retail traders out and level the playing field. Who knows what Citadel and other liquidity providers will do in response to this? Maybe if they alter PFOF in a way that I want them to, that allows retail order flow to partake and also provide liquidity and also gain the rewards from such. It's probably a topic for another video, and I've probably used up my word quota on the day, so I'll just leave you there with this, and just remember, just because you're a day trader doesn't mean you have to trade every single day.